Welcome, everyone. Hello, welcome. It's good to have so many of you joining us today. So we will kick things off and get started, but welcome, welcome. We're seeing our numbers increase a bit, so give that a second. Okay. So welcome to Data for Everyone. My name is Sarah Gonzalez, and I'm a data librarian with Northwestern University's Galter Health Sciences Library and Learning Center. And today I am co-instructing with Justin De La Cruz, the Associate Director of the National Center for Data Services at the Network of the National Library of Medicine, based at NYU Health Sciences Library. And next slide, please. The NNLM is the Network of the National Library of Medicine and is an outreach program of the National Library of Medicine, which is an institute at NIH. The National Library of Medicine is the world's largest biomedical library, which maintains and makes available a vast print collection and produces electronic information resources like Medline Plus and PubMed. NNLM is a program of the NLM and is comprised of 7 regional medical libraries, or RMLs, 4 offices, and 4 centers. Northwestern University is located in Region 6, and the university also hosts NEC, which is NNLM's National Center for Evaluation. And NCDS, the National Center for Data Services, is hosted at NYU and is in Region 7. And next slide, please. So firstly, we have a question for you in the form of a survey, and we'd like to ask, what do you think of when you hear the word data? So please take a few moments to put your associations with the word data into our survey. There's the link, and you can also do a QR code. That's a Slido survey. If you go to slido.com, our activity number is 2269753.
And the link is in the chat. If you aren't able to access it, go ahead and put it in the chat instead of Slido.
So we're already seeing some great submissions here of what you think of when you hear data. Numbers,
Headache.
information. Go ahead. Yeah, statistics comes up as a big one as well.
Yeah, I think it's by size here. So the numbers is the biggest. I think it's maybe showing that's the most response so far.
Interesting responses as well. Monsters. Lots of interesting things there. Messy numbers for sure. Okay. Yeah, so lots of different things that we think of when we think of data.
I like collected information from research is a pretty specific answer, but that I think definitely qualifies.
This is great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for contributing. Okay. So now, and I do think we'll touch on some of these ideas as we talk together, and hopefully we'll overcome some of the scarier aspects of data as we learn a bit more about the basics of data. So now let's move on to our learning objectives of the day. So our goals today are to define common data terms related to health data. And secondly, to prepare a spreadsheet for creating a simple data visualization. And then finally, to identify further learning opportunities for working with data. Okay, and next slide, please. So firstly, let's talk about some common data terms. And next slide, please. To set the stage for that, we'd really like to acknowledge that data is all around us. Every day and in many ways, whether we're really aware of it or not, we are generating data or working with data in some way. So perhaps we're looking at the numbers in our health apps, noting how many hours we slept or steps we walked. Or maybe we're looking over the metadata of something we want to watch on a streaming platform, noting the cast list, description, ratings, and etc. And similarly, we could be looking over the descriptors of something we would like to purchase on a shopping site, noting the cost, the description, whether the item is available in a variety of colors or sizes, etc. Or maybe we're wrangling a big event in our lives, like a wedding, and keeping track of guest names and addresses, food and flower orders, gift registry items, and much more. So in each of these scenarios, we're collecting, evaluating, and making decisions for our lives based on data. And next slide, please. So now let's move on to some key data definitions. So it can be helpful to start with basic terminology to differentiate the data itself from some of its associated concepts and terms. So scientific data, according to the NIH Data Management and Sharing Plan, or DMSP definition, is the recorded factual material that is commonly accepted in the scientific community as of sufficient quality to validate and replicate research findings, regardless of whether the data are used to support scholarly publications. So that's our really official definition. But in this class, we'll start by focusing on other more general types of data, such as the examples that we talked about in the previous slide. So data is something people tend to work with in stages. And first, it must be collected and recorded. So that brings us to data input. And data input can be defined as a way to capture or record raw data. Examples include health indicators, entered into or maybe automatically recorded by a health app, or something like downloading a list of last year's Amazon purchases and all the attendant data from that. Then the next stage of working with data is data processing. And processing involves converting the recorded data into a more meaningful form. So examples include tweezing out important pieces of information from a downloaded list of purchases or invoices, and placing those pieces of information into a spreadsheet. So, for example, the things I might like to pick out and analyze from my downloaded list could include product names, prices, dates of purchases, and whether the item was a gift or a personal purchase. And next slide, please. So here now is an example of what a spreadsheet containing that tweezed out shopping data from invoices might actually look like. So based on the particular budgeting questions that the shopper would like to answer, they can construct a spreadsheet with just a few columns and noting things like the product name, how many of each product was purchased, the date of the purchase, the unit price, the total price, and whether the purchase was intended as a gift or as a personal item. By examining these column names and brainstorming a bit, we might already see some potential questions that this data could answer. Questions such as, how much money did the shopper spend on gifts in a given month? And then kind of brainstorming and going on, then these ideas lead us to our next group of definitions. And next slide, please. So here's some key data definitions. Data analysis is the process of extracting meaningful information from data. It can involve simple sorting and counting, or more complex calculations. Some examples are included on the slide and include things like determining from the shopping data whether more money is spent in one particular month versus another, or determining how often repeat purchases of items happen, maybe to see if a good discount can be achieved by using a subscribe and save feature or something along those lines. And metadata is another definition. This is information that describes, explains, and otherwise contextualizes data. The column headers in the shopping data spreadsheet are examples of metadata because they describe what is being recorded, such as the names of the products or the prices of the products. A variable is any type of symbol that represents information. In addition to being metadata themselves, the column headers in the shopping data spreadsheet are also variables because they symbolize the shopping data recorded in each category. And variables, importantly, can be found in both quantitative and qualitative data. And then next, a database is an organized collection of data that's stored electronically. So in the shopping data spreadsheet, even though it's a simple spreadsheet, that really is a simple example of a database. But also, databases can be much more complex, storing multiple tables like that or spreadsheet-like listings of information. So multiple tables and also hundreds and thousands of variables. Next slide, please. So now let's move on to the how-tos of setting up a spreadsheet. And it does help to know some of the basic terminology when doing that. And then commonly in studies, data is organized and wrangled in this spreadsheet sort of rectangular format. So the terminology used in these spreadsheet-like settings includes the following. So firstly, the spreadsheet is set up according to a grid consisting of rectangles, and then each individual rectangle that has some data in it is called a cell. So each cell contains some type of data, and then those data pieces within the cell are referred to as values. So common formats for the values are numeric, text, and date. Next, columns are what run up and down on the spreadsheet, and they're generally formatted to contain the variable as their column header or their column name. The variable denotes the name of the data value category that's going to be collected. And variables should be formatted to contain only one type of value. So therefore, all the values running down each column of the spreadsheet should have the same format. So that should all be date, or all be numeric, or all be text. And each cell should contain only one value. Rows run from left to right across the spreadsheet. And in spreadsheet settings, rows are generally formatted to contain the instances of observation. So that's the thing or event about which you're recording information. And all that information goes across in one row. Each instance of observation can consist of recording the values for many different variables. And next slide, please. So while you're setting up the columns in a spreadsheet, it's best to columns in a spreadsheet, it's best to set up the data type or format that each column is meant to collect really as soon as possible, right when you're creating the spreadsheet from scratch, if possible. So to select this format, that is done by selecting your column and right-clicking on it and choosing Format Cells from the menu. The most common format types are text, which is useful for data like product names, personal names, basically anything that must be recorded in words. The numeric format is useful for simple numeric counts of things. So this could be prices, age, basically any data that can be recorded in a number format. And then finally, dates is useful for recording dates, and sometimes date and time. So when you actually open the options in your spreadsheet program's date menu, you may notice that there's many different date formats to choose from, such as some of the ones pictured here. So it is important to look those over carefully and choose the format of the date that's going to work best with your particular project. And next slide, please. So now let's see some examples really of how these common data terms look when you look at the spreadsheet. This is a visual example of the data terms that we've just discussed. So here you see that each column in the spreadsheet has a column header or column name, and that's also the variable name. The columns run down the spreadsheet while the rows or the instances of observation run across. The unique data values are all recorded in their individual cells. And the columns are formatted specifically to their data, such as the date data being recorded consistently in that month, day, and year format, and the prices being recorded consistently in the accounting format, going up to 2 decimal places. And then variables that must be recorded in full written words are in the text format, as we can see on the left. So that's what they look like in practice, this terminology. Okay, and next slide, please. So now let's do a quick knowledge check. Just in these first few minutes, we've learned a lot about data already and data's associated terms. So now as a check, I would say, please give your answer for the following question. Which of the following are true of data variables? A, variables are symbols that represent some kind of information. B, variable names are typically recorded as the column headers of spreadsheets. C, variables can be found in both quantitative and qualitative data. Or D, all of the above. Okay, we're seeing some answers in chat. We also have this in the
You
Slido.
probably have beat me in chat, but if you would like to play along at home on the slides, it's also available there. We are seeing a lot of uppercase and lowercase d's in the chat,
Yes, we are.
like
Lots of those in
almost
the chat.
exclusively.
Many, many of those responses in the Slido as well. So thank you. Absolutely. This information we covered, hopefully that's all very clear that all of these are true of data variables. So thank you for participating, everybody. Okay, over to you, Justin.
All right, thanks so much. So in my portion of today's talk, I will help you set up a spreadsheet. But first, I wanted to give you a little inspirational graphic here. So this is from a subreddit called Data is Beautiful. So that's a community on Reddit where they might share different ideas for visualizing or understanding data. This is just one example we found where someone who was tracking their biking was able to put it in a graphical representation here. So you can see three different types of measures that they had on their path to 1,000 miles. So on the top, you see a cumulative distance as the y-axis and the dates as the x-axis. So it's going by month. So you see those little steps happening going up over month by month. You can see their progress to their goal distance. And then this is also an animation, which you don't normally see in presentations or, maybe you see on websites or some more interactive sites now. Um, but that little figure is just showing the progress over time. On the lower left, you see average speed. And so you can see the speed in miles per hour as the x-axis. And you'll see they're doing a lot of 14 and 15 mile per hours as they go along. And on the lower right, I think is the type of biking activity that they're doing. So you can see it stays at commuting pretty long there for 100% in the pie graph on the lower right. And then they spread out to using biking for errands and for fun as well. So there's a whole science to representing data and visualizations and choosing the correct chart graphic for the data that you have, because not every data you have is represented in every type of graph. You have to choose accordingly to what you have available to you. Picturing Evel Knievel. Oh yeah, that's a cool reference. All right. So that's a little bit of inspiration as we get started here. Um, I also wanted to launch a poll here so we can show, we talked earlier, Sarah was talking about how data is pretty much everywhere around us if we choose to focus on it and to collect it. So we can choose to focus on anything that we do, usually measured over time, usually measured through counts or instances. We had a few examples here, somebody measuring their distance of biking and why they're biking. But here we'll just do a very simple example of what this group has or doesn't have in terms of pets. And then we can use the results together to make a basic chart in Google Sheets. So I'll take you through those steps in a second. But for now, let's go back to the poll and try it out here so we have some data to work with. So we mentioned as you answer, there are a few different definitions for data. There's not one that encompasses everything. There was that one for scientific data from NIH. But basically, one unifying factor is that data is recorded, right? So we need to have some kind of data point or recording of what's going on. Otherwise, it might be there, but it's not observed, it's not recorded, and there's not much we can do with that in terms of processing data and visualizing data, analyzing data. So the first step is definitely trying to take a look at what's available to us. Okay, so of the answers here, we see that most people do not have pets. And then behind that, the next popular answer is dogs, which I think might track sort of nationally for Americans. And that's another thing we could do is we could compare data sets to each other. So if we have this particular instance now and we kind of look at national surveys, we can see how we, as a sample, compare to larger samples for this question. All right, but we have a pretty good set of numbers here. So I'll show you how to represent that in a spreadsheet and how to transfer that into a visualization. So one thing we need to do to get started is to use spreadsheet software. We're going to use Google Sheets today for just ease of showing you examples. There's also Excel, which is a popular one, and other open options. I think LibreOffice and other ones are still available for free. So anything you're using will have the same kind of controls and things you can do within it. It might just have slightly different menus. So I'm going to move this over so I can see what's going on as I put in my spreadsheet. And then I think I have my Drive open here. So if you never used it before, you can go to Google Drive and sign in if you have an account with Google, and you can create a new spreadsheet under New Sheets. And starting with really good data practices, what we want to do is name our file. So you might have an account where you have a lot of untitled files or blank documents. We could start today with data for everyone. Example one. I don't know if I'm going to do a separate sheet for example two, but I just put that for now. And I just got used to having no blank spaces in my file names, which is a popular choice when you're doing coding and stuff. But for most purposes, you can enter blank spaces in your titles if you want. So it's a good idea to name it. Our next step is to identify what data we have. So our question is one poll question on what pets do you have? We can even name that the title of the file if we wanted to. But the types of variables we have, I think I'll just type them out here. We have dogs, cats, cats and dogs. We have other, and we have none. So we're making a list of the answers that we had to our question. And what I'm going to do is identify all of these. These are our rows, so these are instances of the data that we have. So each one of these is a type of variable, which I'm just going to call pets here. And you don't have to. The computer will understand either way, but I like to place a bold on pets, so I remember that that is my header row. That is the variable that is within this column. And over here, I will list the numbers as counts, which is just a common word to use, or instances or things like that, to show that they're numerical counts of the categories that we have. I still see some answers trickling in, but I will just take what we have right now and record it. So for none, we have 33. For dogs, we have 31. Cats and dogs are 10. Cats are 8. And others 3. All right, so one thing we talked about is making sure we label what each cell is. So each of these rectangles has its own information in it. And what we want to do is make sure the computer understands that this is text and this is a number. So what we can do is highlight the cells, and we can either right click or we can choose the format menu in Google Sheets. And the format, the first option here, we have all of these types of numbers and dates and times. And then we also have plain text. So Our pets and counts are text. Our dogs, cats, and other, all of these are text as well. And then our connection is unstable. You still hear me fine up there? Hopefully I'm coming through okay. Okay, I see a raised hand, so I'm assuming everybody's doing fine. Format we have for these is numbers. So we talked about date and time and other things like that. Right now, if we just choose number, it will give us a couple of decimal points. And so what that's doing is just showing specificity. So if we don't need decimal points to be that accurate for us, these are total counts. So there's not going to be part of a person answering about dogs. These are integers, so we can just go in and reformat it as a custom number. And we could leave it this way. I'm just showing you this option as you go forward. It wouldn't really impact too much in this example, but as you get further into it, you might want to know how specific you can get with data labels here. So as a number with a whole number that's never going to have a decimal, we can go into custom number formats in the format menu, and we can hit the 0 for 0 decimals and apply. And now we have a spreadsheet with two columns, one for pets, one for counts. And we have our listed answers for the poll that we had. We also have our text identified as text and our numbers identified as numbers, whole numbers. So what we can do now is to highlight everything that we want to represent in our visualization. And we can go to insert a chart here. Now, you may all have different ways of doing this, and that's totally fine as long as the result's there for you. There's shortcut keys, there's buttons, there's menu options, there's right clicks, and all kinds of things. We're just going to show you the most visual, like direct way of doing it now as an easy way to show an example. But if you insert a chart here, everything that you have highlighted on this portion of your sheet will show up as a chart. So that means if you have different data tables going on in the same sheet or different sheets happening, you can highlight what you need to specify the chart that you want to make. If you don't highlight anything, I believe it just reads the entire chart that you have, the entire data set that you have, to see if it can visualize it for you. All right, so now we have a chart that's a bar chart. It's called counts versus pets. So this is the spreadsheet telling us this is probably the chart you want to see. You have a very simple breakdown. You have a bunch of different numbers in a few different categories. It doesn't look like too complex stuff going on, so they're offering a bar chart as their first example. On the right, there are different ways to set it up. So if you did think that they did something wrong or you wanted to see a different orientation, you can do that as well. That's just flipping the axes here so that the pets are up and down and the counts are left and right. Sometimes the horizontal is useful if you have long data labels that are more than a few words. So that makes it a little easier to read going left to right. And then you can do other customizations here with colors and things like that. But I did want to show you that, you see a pronounced effect happening here. And you might be interested to see just how close it is between none and dogs, or what's happening in a row. So you can easily tell, maybe we want to go from least to most answers or most to least. We can do that here by rearranging our data. I think there's another way to do it as well in the customization settings. But one of the ways to do this that's pretty straightforward is to take our highlighted cells here and to do a data sort. So if you do a sort on the whole sheet, it will transform your entire sheet and sort it by whatever values you choose. Here we can sort the data range that we have selected. So that's what I was talking about, doing the sheet versus the range. If you select the range, you can choose your options. So you can specify what you want to do. Right now, the default option is to sort by the first column, A to Z, which would probably put cats first. But what we're trying to do is sort by the numbers. So we can see from most to least or least to most, whichever way we want. So if we go into data, sort range, and advanced range sorting options, what we can see here is a couple of questions. So I know spreadsheets can be a little overwhelming. There's a lot of words and buttons and options available. Um, that's why we try to give you some of the vocabulary here. So if your data has a header row, we do know that it does have a header row. What we did was listed what we have, and then we identified what our variables are. So we know we have a header row. So if we click that, it makes it easier for us to read what we're choosing. So instead of having to look which one's A, which one's B, we can see the name that we assign to it. This is really helpful when you get a much bigger data set where you have hundreds of variables and thousands of entries. This is why it's really crucial to identify all of your variables in advance, to really encode them the same way uniformly across columns and things like that. So this is where human error comes into play and all the other kinds of things like that. Just make sure you label everything correctly. You understand what those labels are. That's why a lot of people create data dictionaries to explain what their labels are. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much stuff you can do with data as you get further into it. But right now we want to sort by counts. So if we sort by counts in A to Z, that's just a metaphor. It's going to go from lowest to biggest now. So even though it says A to Z for letters, we're actually going to work with numbers there. It's still going to understand what we're doing. This chart is really linked to the data that we have here. If we change the data at all, it will also change the chart. You can see that bar increased as I changed from 8 to 9. So if we sort the data from smallest to biggest, then it will also resort the image that we're looking at in the chart. So now we can see this nice non-gradual line, this big increase for dogs and none, and other pets showing up as the least amount of options. So looks like most people have none, and then dogs, cats and dogs together, and then cats and other. We can obviously reverse those. We can change colors if we want each one to have different colors. But for now, this is a basic visualization of this one polling question that's effective. And you want to think when you're making a chart, is somebody going to understand this within a few seconds? If they see this out of context, is everything there that they need to understand? That's why it's good to have a chart label with your X and Y axes, a chart title, and even a chart description at the bottom telling you what you're recording and how you're showing it. Okay. I haven't looked at the chat in a while, so are there any questions on that?
I haven't seen any questions yet, but please do add any questions you have in the chat for sure.
Or while we're here, if you have any examples of data that you've collected that you've looked at over time, like personal data, maybe, obviously don't say specifics, but if you've tracked finances or if you've tracked sort of meals or anything else like that, even informally, maybe mention that in the chat. See if you've gotten anything from it. Let us know your feedback on what you've gotten from that process. But that is really the best way to get started with data is to start with your own interests. So where's your interest? And then how can you turn that into data? Or how can you find existing data on that to then look at visualizations? That'll give you that interest to keep working on it, even through all these terms and all the buttons and everything. You'll have that driving interest to figure out what's going on. And that's one way you can get better at doing this kind of stuff. Okay, so now we're going to ask you all to go through this process again on your own. And I won't do the step by step now, but if you have your spreadsheet program open, we can do another poll here and do the same kind of exercise. So I will put the polling back on. And the new question is on preferring chocolate or vanilla flavor. And this is also a very general question. I think we mentioned how data can be very specific. It can be pretty general. This is without context, so this is taste alone. Obviously, we could be talking about anything from cookies to ice cream. Um, so that's another thing to keep in mind is that at what level of specificity are you collecting data? How general do you want to collect it? How specific? Really depends on the outcome. So, what do you want to learn from it? What do you want to show or investigate? That's how you determine at what level of granularity you choose your questions or your data points. All right, we have a couple of plus ones for chocolate in the chat. And as you all work on this, I'll give you a couple minutes to work on this chart. Same process that we did before, pretty similar. I see people in the chat tracking daily steps, tracking plants. That's interesting. Pollinators, bloom color, bloom time, height, labs and percentage of individuals for substances. Yeah, tracking bills is something that I do as well. That's right. There's not a totality of answers available. The third choice contains two data elements, flavor or personal response of being offended. I think in the first example of this class, we put like other, or I think we had only two choices, and then people responded in the chat that they were upset. So this is mostly an inside joke for me, but it is true that this is not labeled very well. More of a joke thing at this point. Oh, furniture use in learning spaces. That's interesting. I'm wondering if you're doing counts or if you're doing feedback from people. I remember looking at a furniture use study in libraries where they had people drawing things. So, like, people use the library, like drawing places that they went as they walked around. I think diary entries too. There's a lot of different data you can get on topics like that where you might talk to people and ask, for qualitative data. You might do counts of people sitting in chairs, and then you can do a mixed method study for that. That's interesting. All right, doing observational counts. Patron counts. Yeah, use studies. Cool. All right. Anybody have
Justin?
any? Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say there's a question that maybe you can show when you do the spreadsheet about please show how to switch X and Y axis again. So maybe you can
Oh, yeah.
show
Okay.
that. Yeah.
Sure. I will go ahead and do this example then. Um, Let me grab this so I can see what the numbers are. We'll go back to our sheet. You know what? I will create another sheet. Data for everyone, example 2. And then also sometimes you put the date, so this is not conforming to my previous file. But, it never hurts to put a date on a file. It's very helpful, especially for reports or creative projects where you keep changing them over time. All right, so I'm seeing some numbers. Let me get some windows out of the way. So we will put flavors. We use our bogus labeling system here. 43 for chocolate, 30, and 23. So normally a question like this, you might, if you wanted to know what people really enjoyed, you might have a fill in the blank, and then they can write what they want, and you can represent that later after you collate people spelling things differently and do the proper counts on that. You can do that. Doing bold. I'll just do the numbers this time. I think the plain text is usually assumed pretty well. So we'll highlight everything and insert a chart. The question was how to flip the axes. But this time it is now a pie chart because they like that for, I guess, even simpler amounts of information. We can always go in to change. So the way I changed before, the orientation and the type of chart is going into setup on the right as it pops up when you create a chart. You can choose up and down. So this is a vertical. And then we can also choose the horizontal bar chart from here. You can also choose any number of other things that might not make sense in this example. Like a map. We wouldn't have any map data for that, so that was a bad choice for that. So that is how to flip the setup. You can do a lot more customization in the customize menu. The number of counts, like you can change the bars and increments and stuff like that. But we have chocolate as a clear winner here. All right. Any other questions? All right. See more examples of data collection, which is awesome. Okay, that was my next thing is questions. So if I don't see any questions, then I can continue.
It looks like we have a hand raised from Tanya. So
Okay.
I'm gonna allow you to talk. There you go.
Thank you. Just a quick question. When I was preparing my chart, I got my second column label on the title of my chart versus the first column label, which is what I expected. So where did I go wrong?
Let me see. So your second column, are you saying that this is
Oh,
not showing up in the right place on your chart?
Yeah, so I bolded the first column. So column A, I bolded A1.
Okay.
Did not bold one or sorry, 1A I bolded. I did not bold 1B, and 1B came up as my label for my chart
Okay. It came up as the title or as the label
as a
underneath here?
title, sorry.
Okay. So yeah, you can change the title by actually just double clicking on it.
Okay.
And then you can do chart title here. So you can label it whatever you like. So ice cream
Oh, in the
flavors.
customize. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, one thing to note is that you can change pretty much any word or color or line that you like or dislike here. If you double click to or right click to edit, then you have a customize and you can go through. There's so many things in this menu. I didn't want to go through every single one. But you can do, like I said, you can change the number of lines you have. You can change labeling. So if you wanted to place numbers on the bars, you can do that as well. You can change the bar colors and you can change the text. So it's just a matter of seeing where in the menu you need to go. And my advice is to just go click on everything until you get to what you need. Sometimes if you click directly on the box, it'll take you to that. particular place. So I clicked on chart title and now it's the chart title. If I click on flavors, I can rename flavors. So yeah.
If you have a spreadsheet that has lots of different columns in it, when you hit the insert chart, it gives you lots of different options. Do you just kind of need to figure out what data you're wanting to highlight? Is that the best recommendation or?
Yeah, you take a look at like what you have available to you and what's going to
Okay,
make the most sense for it.
okay,
Um, there are some resources on like data communications that we can send to you if you send us an email,
sure.
ncds@nnlm.gov. There's a few things that I've sent to people before on kind of how to choose charts. But yeah, it really depends on the data you have and the message you're trying to convey. Like I said, some charts are going to make absolutely no sense. And you'll see this in mainstream news outlets and everything. You'll see charts that it takes you so long to figure out, you can't figure out what's going on. It's just a really poor choice. So it is important to think about what you have and to maybe talk to people who do this a lot to see like if they have opinions on how to represent it. Um, there are some, depending on where you work, there's some like biostatisticians and other people who might help a little bit with analysis, or other people maybe in the library or professors who work on visualizations a lot. But if not, we can send you some materials, talk about it.
We have some other questions in the chat, but if we want to save those for the end, we can.
Okay. Yeah, I have some links. So it's, I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about the links, but I do want to point out a few things to you for the rest of the class. And then we can definitely have time for a few questions before we wrap up. So these are all in the slides and also in the Word handout. So if I go too fast, you can go back and see everything that we have listed here. I just wanted to give you an overview in my own words so you have an understanding of what these things are. At NCDS, we helped build the data education programs that we see now. So we have a website explaining the different ways we thought about data classes and how you can navigate through the data offerings we currently have. So we create a generalist pathway, data management, data science. If you're interested in these topics, you can go down this website and see the different classes we have available in these different categories. So that's the data pathways guide. We also have a lot of materials on our YouTube. So this class will be recorded and will be placed on our YouTube in a playlist for NCDS. We also have it available on our website, and we're also adding materials for long-term storage in Zenodo. So this is a open repository for usually for scientific research materials, but also for educational materials and other files. So we created an instance for ourselves at Zenodo. We also have a LinkedIn, so you can see a lot of our materials on YouTube, our website, LinkedIn, and Zenodo. We do have some other introductory classes. So if you're just starting here, this is our most basic data class. Terminology, spreadsheet, pretty much done. But we have other things here. Data services on demand is self-paced. You can go through these at your own pace, read some readings we chose, watch some videos we chose, answer some questions we had. And then other topics on data standards, common data elements, making sense of numbers, and health statistics. There's a lot of great recordings and class materials we have available. Some of these will be repeated this year, so take a look at the class calendar on the NNLM website. Subscribe to that to get the updates on that. But if they're not available as upcoming classes, they're usually available as recordings on our YouTube. I mentioned this one. The on-demand classes are a really nice place to go from here, especially if you're interested in data management, if you're looking at opportunities in those areas. We also have classes on the DMP tool, on data de-identification, and OpenRefine is for data cleaning. So we took some existing materials for that and showed people how to use that tool. We have a toolkit around the data management sharing policy from NIH. So this is policy work. It's a little bit different from actually going in and wrangling data, but it's kind of connected in terms of how researchers use and share data. So this is information on that. So if you've heard about the NIH policy, if you've heard other things in this area, you can get up to speed with this toolkit, and it links out to other groups that are working on this as well. So it'll kind of explain the policy, explain what they're asking of researchers, how librarians can help, and other resources other people have made who work on this topic as well. And then there are some organizations outside of NNLM that also offer pretty cool data opportunities for education. We have the Carpentries, which is worldwide, has been around for a while. They have a specific library carpentry for topics in libraries that are relevant to librarians, but also more general data and software carpentry lessons. These are all free online to look through their lesson plans. And then sometimes they offer real-time workshops for different topics. There's also two programs run by pretty much the same group of people. Data Services Continuing Professional Education is an application process. It might actually be open right now if you look for that. And RDMLA is a self-paced online modules in research data management. These are just a couple of links that we thought were cool to some other things. I'll let you explore those on your own if you're interested, but basically just ways to stay engaged and interested in data work in libraries. And then if you enjoyed some of the explanations of topics from today and keywords and things like that, we have other glossaries and definitions available for you here. So our data glossary is up to speed if you see something in data science or data management or repositories or open science that you don't know what it means, you can find the definition and examples and resources on our data glossary. Okay, as promised, we do have a few minutes for answering questions here. And if we don't answer your question or if you need additional resources, feel free to email us ncds@nnlm.gov. We'll share what we have with you, or possibly connect you to others we know working in this area. Okay. Do you know where the questions started, Sam?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's one question from John saying, how do you create macros?
Okay, cool. So macros is like the step between what we did in Excel and like full-on computer programming. So you've heard of Python, R, these other languages. Those are things that can also work with spreadsheets. Macros is a whole nother topic. It's like a whole class on its own. But basically, it's a built-in feature in Excel that helps you run automated processes. And other than saying that, I don't really know. I've used it in the past, but it's been so long that I don't really know how to set it up. So there might be a setup video, maybe online somewhere you can find. If you're trying to troubleshoot something, feel free to email. I'll take a look at it, see if there's a easier solution. But basically, it's a neat way of like integrating computer programming into Excel for people who don't necessarily program.
Let's see. Oh,
Setting up
go ahead.
sheets, I think we covered that. How you get the menu from the side to come up. I right-click to edit the chart that I was working on. So if you click on a chart or double-click on a chart, it'll open up the customizable menu in Google Sheets. All right, information sharing for papers. Thank yous for the class.
There's also a question.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, there was a question in the Q&A section from Miranda, and it says, when is it necessary to distinguish between independent or dependent variables?
I think that comes in a lot with like working with like SPSS and things like that. It has to do with like setting up your methodologies for research and analysis. So we didn't really talk about that too much here, but it does come into play as you get into methodology and like setting up research. So if you are setting up your own research project for the first time, especially, I would talk to someone, even if they're, just someone who works with statistics, to talk about what those categories mean and what for your research would work the best. Because you really want to front load your planning as much as possible, determining what data to collect. Because it's really awful if you do this whole study and then you get to analysis and you're like, oh, I needed this other bit of data, or I needed to set up this calculation a little bit differently and I don't have what's available for it. So basically, the stage at determining what variables you're going to get or use comes somewhere between like either finding your own data and collecting it or determining what you're looking for. So what are you investigating and what do you need in order to investigate that? Is I guess how I'd explain that.
Let's see. And then I'm just going to answer William's question, and I kind of answered it in the chat. It says, I took this class for extra credit in class. Is there a certificate of completion for attending? So there is. We usually send out an evaluation form. I will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody that attended to the link to the evaluation. So once you fill that form out, you can claim credit on MLA's website, and they will have a certificate of class completion for you to download from there.
There's a question about the specific animation we showed. I think that was a custom creation. I don't know how they made it. So I don't think I can guarantee that you can do that with an Excel, but you might be able to. I will drop in the chat a link to another website I've used sometimes too, Data Wrapper, which is a pretty cool spreadsheet and visualization option online. I think there's a free version of it you could get. But that is one I do remember there being some more like enhanced graphics available. So they might even do animations. I can't remember, but it's a neat tool. All right, it looks like we're wrapping up. So once again, if you have any questions, please email us ncds@nnlm.gov. We appreciate your time today and we'll be glad to reconnect with you in the future.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.